Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast. Today we're going to be exploring the top news headlines for April 11th.
Sounds good.
We've got a lot to cover, both domestic and international news, so let's jump right into it.
All right.
First up, we're heading over to Nigeria, where there seems to be a big push to boost their agricultural sector.
Yeah, the African Development Bank, the AFDB, they've pledged to mobilize a pretty significant amount of money, $2.2 billion for special agro-industrial processing zones in 28 Nigerian states. These are SAPZs.
Wow, $2.2 billion. That's a huge investment.
It is.
Where exactly is this all taking place?
Well, the first groundbreaking ceremony was in Cross River State, and they are a major producer of a lot of agricultural products, particularly cocoa, cassava, rice, bananas.
Oh, wow.
They also have the Obudu cattle ranch, so there's potential there for livestock as well. One of the things that makes Cross River State a prime location for it as SAPZ is that they already have a lot of the infrastructure in place, like an export processing zone at port facilities. That'll make it a lot easier to get these processed goods to market, maybe even export to neighboring countries like Cameroon.
I see. So it sounds like it's not just the AFDB taking this on. They're partnering with some other organizations.
That's right. The Islamic Development Bank and the International Fund for Agricultural Development are also involved in this project.
And how much is each organization contributing to this project?
Well, the AFDB itself has committed $934 million, and the partners together are providing $938 million.
Got it. So they're rolling this out in phases.
Yes, so the first phase is going to focus on 8 states with a financing package of $510 million.
Okay, and which states are those?
So those would be Cross River, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Oyo, Ogun, Kwara, Imo, and the Federal Capital Territory. And then the second phase of this is going to aim to mobilize that larger amount, the $2.2 billion, across a total of 28 states.
So this sounds like a pretty high priority for the Nigerian government.
It definitely seems that way. Vice President Shettima was actually at the groundbreaking in Cross River State, and he emphasized how important this project is for the government.
Okay.
They're really hoping that this is going to be transformative for agriculture and stimulate economic growth.
So what's the big picture here? What are they hoping to achieve with these zones?
Well, there are a few key goals they're trying to address. First, they want to tackle the lack of processing infrastructure. There just aren't enough facilities to process agricultural products efficiently in Nigeria.
Okay.
They also want to improve market access for farmers. It's often difficult for farmers to get their products to the people who want to buy them.
Yeah.
And finally, they hope that this project will create jobs, especially in rural areas where unemployment is a big problem.
So by creating these zones, they're trying to create an environment that's really attractive to investors and fosters innovation.
Exactly.
Okay.
They see this as a way to get all of the players in the agricultural sector working together.
And it sounds like Calabar is going to be a model for these zones.
Yes, that's the idea. It'll be a hub for processing, storage, connecting farmers with businesses.
That's great.
And then the Tinubu administration, they're really pushing for food security, and they want to make SAPZ a government agency in all 36 states.
Wow. So they're really going all in on this.
Yeah, they're hoping it'll create jobs, especially for young people.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what's happening with global trade. It seems like things between the U.S. and China are heating up again.
Yeah, it's that familiar trade war tension.
Yeah.
China has just announced that they're increasing tariffs on U.S. goods. It's going to be going up to 125%. This comes after the U.S. raised tariffs on Chinese goods to the same level.
Oh, wow. So they're really mirroring each other.
It's a tit-for-tat situation.
Yeah.
The U.S. tariffs, they're previously at 104%. This is a significant jump on both sides.
Yeah.
And the new Chinese tariffs are set to take effect tomorrow, April 12th.
Oh, wow. So very soon. China's reaction seems pretty strong.
Yeah, their Customs Department, they put out a statement basically saying that the U.S. tariffs violate international trade rules, and they're calling it unilateral bullying.
Oh, wow.
And this announcement came directly from China's State Council Tariff Commission. So they're making it very clear that they're not happy about this.
So what's their position on all of this? Are they open to negotiations or?
Well, it sounds like they're pretty firm in their stance. They're basically saying that with these tariffs at 125%, there's no way that U.S. goods are going to be competitive in the Chinese market.
Okay.
And it sounds like they're basically ignoring any further tariff increases that the U.S. might impose. They're just not engaging with it at this point.
So what happened to that pause on tariffs that President Trump was talking about?
Well, President Trump did announce a pause on reciprocal tariffs earlier, But China was specifically excluded from that pause.
Oh, wow.
It seems like this trade war is very much still on.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears back to Nigeria, where Edo State is launching a new agency focused on their diaspora. What's the thinking behind this?
So they're calling it the Edo Diaspora Agency. And they're really trying to harness the potential of Edo indigenes who are living abroad.
Okay, so they want to engage with their citizens overseas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Loretta Ogboro-Okor, she's the Director General of the agency. She spoke at a press conference in Benin City. She said they're really focused on strengthening relationships with Edo people living in other countries.
So it sounds like they want to tap into the resources and maybe the influence that those citizens have.
Exactly. They're hoping to increase remittances back to Edo State and, involve the diaspora in the economic, social, and cultural development of the state.
It sounds like a smart move. I noticed they also mentioned human trafficking.
Yeah, that's a huge concern in Edo State.
Yeah.
The agency is going to be collaborating with other agencies to try to tackle that problem. They believe the diaspora can provide valuable insight and support in that effort.
It makes sense. So it seems like Edo State really values its diaspora.
They do. They see them as a strategic asset, almost like an extension of the state itself. They compared it to Edo's geographic location within Nigeria, saying that just like the state is strategically located, the diaspora is a strategic network across the globe.
Interesting.
They also talked about the economic impact of remittances. They want to see those contributions grow.
Sure.
But it's not just about the money. The agency also wants to address some of the challenges that Edo people face when they're living abroad, like discrimination, racism, those kinds of things.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, they want to make sure their people feel supported.
So they're trying to build a bridge between the diaspora and the government back home.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, let's move on to a pretty unusual story coming out of Italy. It seems like they've decided to classify certain professions in a new way.
Yeah, it's causing quite a stir. The Italian government's National Institute of Statistics, that's ESTAT, they've introduced a new AICO code for people working in the sex work industry.
What is an AICO code?
It's basically a way for them to classify economic activities in Italy. It's mainly for administrative and statistical purposes.
Right.
But yeah, this new code includes categories for like escorts and people who provide sexual services and even people who organize events or manage premises related to prostitution.
Wow, so that last part, that sounds like it could be pretty controversial, especially given the legal status of prostitution in Italy.
It is. 2 lawmakers have actually called for an explanation from Parliament. They're concerned that by officially classifying these activities, the government is essentially legitimizing something that could be linked to exploitation or criminal organizations.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Senator Alessandra Maiorino, she specifically questioned the decision and how it might make women more vulnerable.
Yeah, I can see why she'd be worried about that. But the government, do they have a different perspective?
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini, he's actually spoken out in support of the move. He called it a step forward for legality. But it's important to remember that in Italy, sex work itself is not illegal. But pimping and running prostitution networks, those are illegal. So this AICO code seems to be covering activities that are both legal and illegal.
So how can they justify classifying illegal activities?
Well, ISTAT, they've explained that they're doing this to align with European Union standards. Some EU countries have regulated sex work. So this code is meant to allow for better data comparison across all member states. But ISTAT has also said that in Italy, this code will only apply to legal activities.
Well, that's good to hear, but it still seems like a really gray area.
It definitely is, and a lot of people are questioning the ethics of classifying these activities at all.
Yeah, I can see why they would. Let's move on to a different topic. The NDLEA in Nigeria has made a significant arrest in Lagos.
Yeah, they arrested the owner of a restaurant in Lekki. It's called The Millions Takeout. His name is Orokadair Demil Ebenezer.
What was he arrested for?
The NDLEA says that he was importing a pretty large amount of loud from the U.S.
Loud? What's that?
It's a type of cannabis. They found 60 parcels of it.
Okay. And when did this arrest happen?
He was arrested on Monday, March 24th at Bay Lounge, also in Lekki. It seems like he was waiting for a delivery.
So this was a targeted arrest then?
It was. They had intercepted a shipment with 7 large cartons that arrived in Lagos on March 12th.
Oh, wow.
That's what led them to Ebenezer. And after they arrested him, they searched his home and found more loud, a cannabis grinder, and other drug paraphernalia.
So it sounds like he was running a pretty sophisticated operation.
It does. They seized over 32 kilograms of drugs.
And it seems like he'd been involved in this for a while.
Yeah, according to the NDLEA, Ebenezer said that he started dealing drugs back in 2017.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't a one-time thing. It seems like the NDLEA has also been busy with other drug-related operations across the country.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, so they arrested a businessman at Murtala Muhammad International Airport. His name is Omarugi Terry. He was trying to export a lot of tramadol pills to Italy.
Yeah.
And in Katsina, they arrested 4 people with a huge amount of skunk, that's another kind of cannabis, and diazepam pills. They also destroyed a ton of cannabis in Edo State.
A literal ton.
Over 13,000 kilograms.
Wow.
And made more seizures in Niger, Enugu, Kwara, and Oyo. They're finding all sorts of strains of cannabis, some even from Ghana and Colorado.
Wow. It's incredible the variety of drugs that they're encountering.
Yeah, it's a never-ending battle.
It seems like it. Let's move on to some more positive news from Nigeria. They've just secured funding for a new tech hub.
Yeah, this is really great news. Nigeria's been awarded a $12.1 million grant from Japan to develop a startup hub in Abuja.
That's fantastic.
It's from the Japan International Cooperation Agency, AICO. And it's going to be managed by the National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA.
Oh, wow. That's a significant investment in the country's tech sector. What are they hoping to achieve with this new hub?
Well, it's going to operate from April 2025 to December 2030. It'll be a collaborative effort between NITDA and the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. And the goal is to align with President Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. They're trying to promote digital innovation, attract private capital, create jobs.
That's great. Who was involved in securing this grant?
Nigeria's Budget and Economic Planning Minister, Abubakar Bagudu, he signed for Nigeria, and GISA's Deputy Head of Mission, Hitoshi Kozaki, signed for Japan. This grant solidifies the partnership between NITDA and JICA.
Okay.
They've actually worked together before on a project called iHatch. It was a startup incubator program that ran for 6 months. It helped create a bunch of jobs.
Okay.
And they're planning on expanding iHatch nationwide. The Director General of NITDA, Kashifu Anua, he said iHatch helped develop market-ready products, which is a huge achievement.
That's great. So this new grant for the Abuja Tech Hub seems like the natural next step for them.
It does.
Well, let's move on to a more serious story. A Nigerian national is facing legal trouble in the U.S.
Yeah, a 24-year-old Nigerian named Mercy Ojedeji has pleaded guilty to student visa fraud and wire fraud. This was in Missouri.
Oh, wow. And what did he do?
Well, it seems he used fake academic credentials like forged transcripts and recommendation letters to get into a chemistry PhD program at a University of Missouri school back in fall 2023.
Okay.
And because of that, he got a bunch of educational benefits, a tuition waiver, a stipend, over $49,000 total.
Wow.
But it gets worse.
Oh, no.
He also used the fake documents to get a Social Security card, open a bank account, rent an apartment. But he was caught because he wasn't attending classes.
Okay.
His enrollment was terminated in January 2024. His visa was canceled. But even after that, he used his invalid visa to get a Missouri driver's license.
Oh, wow.
They caught him because they were investigating a possible romance fraud scheme.
What does that have to do with him?
Well, they found 193 packages containing cash and gift cards worth over $94,000 that were mailed to his romantic partner.
Wow, so he may have been involved in that scheme as well.
It seems so. And 35 of those packages were traced back to IP addresses in Nigeria. Ojedeji admits to the visa fraud, but he denies being part of the romance scam.
Okay, so what kind of penalty is he facing?
Well, he's scheduled to be sentenced on July 10th. He could get up to 30 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. The U.S. Attorney's Office is arguing for a total intended loss of over $1 million at the sentencing hearing. They're basing that on the value of those packages.
Okay, and that's despite his denial of involvement in the romance fraud scheme.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
It is. Well, for our last story today, let's talk about a Nigerian musician whose song has been banned. The Performing Musicians Association of Nigeria, PMAN, they're speaking out against this ban.
Yeah, they're condemning the National Broadcasting Commission, the NBC, for banning Idris Abdul Karim's song, Tell Your Papa.
Okay, and why was the song banned?
Well, the NBC labeled the song not to be broadcast. They said it was because of its objectionable nature. They're citing Section 3.1.8 of the Nigeria Broadcasting Code. Apparently, the song criticizes Nigeria's socioeconomic conditions and specifically calls out President Tinubu's son.
Okay.
The directive from the NBC was issued on April 9th. They basically told all the radio and TV stations not to air the song.
Okay, so what does PMN think about this?
Well, Pretty Okafor, the PMN president, thinks this ban is a huge mistake. He believes that banning it will actually make the song more popular.
How so?
Well, he said that it's going to get a lot of attention now. People are going to be curious about it. It might even go viral.
That makes sense.
They're treading carefully because it is a sensitive issue. But they're standing behind the message of the song. You know, there's a lot of suffering in Nigeria right now.
Right. And what exactly is the message of the song? What's so objectionable about it?
Well, it specifically addresses Say Tinubu. It basically tells him to go tell his father, the president, about the hardship in Nigeria. There's a line that says, "Say, tell your papa country hard. Tell your papa people they die. Tell your papa this one dawn past jaga jaga."
Oh, wow.
And it criticizes Say Tinubu's lifestyle, his travel habits. Apparently, the song was triggered by remarks that Say made calling his father the greatest president in Nigeria's history.
Oh, wow.
So Abdul Karim's song is like a direct response to that, painting a very different picture of what's happening in the country.
Right, so it's a protest song, basically.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it definitely seems like this ban has backfired. It's brought more attention to the song than it ever would have gotten otherwise.
Exactly.
Okay, let's wrap things up with one last story. We have an update on those Russian detainees in Tunisia.
Yeah, Tunisia has released those 11 Russians that were detained back in November. They were suspected of terrorism. Russian state media reports that they're going to be heading back home today, April 11th.
Okay, can you remind me about this case? Where were they found and what were they doing?
They were found near the Tunisian border with Algeria. Russian media was saying that they were just tourists.
Okay.
But Tunisian police said they confiscated some equipment that didn't really seem like tourist stuff. Neither Russia nor Tunisia really gave out that many details about the case.
Okay.
But we know that they were held under suspicion, but they were never formally charged with anything.
Okay.
There were some reports that they were visiting Roman monuments in Hadra, which is near that Algerian border, and not a typical tourist spot.
Right, I remember that.
Tunisia has become a pretty popular tourist destination for Russians lately. It's relatively cheap, they don't need a visa to get in, and a lot of other countries have travel restrictions on them because of the whole conflict in Ukraine. So it makes sense that they'd go to Tunisia.
Yeah, I can see that. But it sounds like being in that less common tourist spot may have raised some red flags for the authorities.
Probably so.
Well, so they're being released after several months in detention without any charges, is that right?
That's what Russian media is reporting. The Russian embassy in Tunis says that they have flights booked and are leaving today.
Well, that's good news for them. But it's still a bit strange that we don't have more information. We don't really know why they were detained in the first place or why they're being released now.
It's a bit of a mystery.
Well, that brings us to the end of our look at today's top news headlines for April 11th. It's been a busy day for news. We've covered everything from agricultural developments to trade wars to controversial song bans.
And mysterious detainees.
Yes, and mysterious detainees. It's clear that there's a lot going on in the world, both good and bad.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us today on IAMC Radio and Podcast for this look at the top news headlines.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.